Mormons have more kids than they can afford.
Here you have the shooter signaling to someone else saying, 5 minutes until the shot. And look carefully who is watching the signal. Watch again.
And I think it's time for Mormons.
Here the man in the blue shirt turns on his video glasses. I only know this because I have the same glasses. A minute later, he signals 4-minute mark.
This country,
Here he looks over to see if Tyler Robinson is on the roof in position, then fixes the detonator on his left shoulder bicep. Look carefully at the bulge on his shoulder.
Around the world, I love how polite you are. I have my team is Mormon. Terrell's a Mormon. Andrew's a Mormon. Mormons are great people. So everything I say, everybody, I'm an evangelical Christian.
The assassin now points his watch outwards and tells everyone to watch the time.
To see this one here, this is a lot closer. See, that's way closer. Now, I want y'all to peep this in case y'all didn't see it. Let's go. You can see them taking something off of him. You see them scrambling and scraping, trying to pull something off of him. I believe this is moving in slow motion here. Up, you see that? Boom. He handed him something. He handed him something. So it wasn't, I thought it was the guy with the plaid, but it's the guy on the ground. It's the guy on the ground that handed it to him. It's the guy on the ground that...
Look at his face, man. Look at that guy's face. Does this look like the face of a security detail where their primary principal just got his head blown off? Or does this look like someone who's been in the middle, they're in the middle of something that they've done, you know what I mean? Like, this is just like par for the course. Calm as cucumbers, dude. Like, no concerns about anything at all.
Handed him. No diddy. No diddy. Yeah, they smiling and everything. Like this is all staged. Yeah, look at them. Why are they smiling?
Let's look at this. Let's watch some 30-06 ballistics, and then I'm going to wrap this thing.
Loaded up, again, with Hornady Precision Hunter, and these are 30-06 178 grade. Here we go. So we had quite the hit with the 30-06, and we had some interesting results. We actually have our jacket laying right here on the table, and that thing is pretty hot. And if we look at our blocks right here, you can see that the 30-06 actually dumped most of its energy within the first 10 inches of this block, and then it started to break up. We have a few pieces of lead here in the second block, but that bullet as a whole pretty much broke up, and the only thing that came out was the jacket. So within the first 10...
What can you say to this you have just watched? We believe so much in justice, and we shall fight until justice prevail. At first, it looked like any other chaotic moment. Panic, noise, confusion. Charlie Kirk stood on stage, mid-sentence, addressing students and supporters. Then, in a matter of seconds, everything fell apart. Screams echoed through the auditorium, security scrambled, and what was meant to be a night of inspiration turned into a scene of irreversible loss. But when the uncut footage surfaced, something changed. It wasn't the sound of the gunfire that caught people's attention. It was what came before it. The stillness, the unease, the subtle glance exchanged between two men standing just feet from Charlie Kirk. Please, before we move on, don't forget to drop your comment as you listening to this new updates. We would definitely respond to all comment. We will be glad to hear your feedbacks on this report and contributions. Thank you for entering into this space. We stand for justice. We stand for Charlie. One bodyguard turned his head a second too soon. Another lowered his radio, hesitating instead of calling it in. And in those frozen moments, before the first shot was fired, before the world even knew the name Tyler Robinson, there was a silence that didn't feel accidental. It wasn't just confusion. It was hesitation caught on camera. The kind of hesitation that asks a question no one wants to face. What if those sworn to protect Charlie Kirk already sensed what was coming? Because in those moments, protection didn't fail, it paused. And when protection pauses, lives are lost, not in noise, but in silence. The silence before the shot. The silence that no one can explain. What do you think? Is the case moving forward carefully, or is progress being slowed by procedural delays? Share your thoughts in the comments below. That's where we hear your thoughts, and where you watching from. To stay updated on every development, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you stay informed as new updates become available. This is Detective Max, and together we stand and fight for justice. September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University. It was supposed to be another stop on Charlie Kirk's American comeback tour. A night of speeches, applause, and a crowd eager to hear from one of the most recognized conservative voices in the country. Hundreds gathered under bright lights, cameras rolling, and security stationed in every visible corner. For those who had attended his events before, the setup was familiar. Metal detectors at the entrances, bag checks at every line, and a visible perimeter of guards, both inside and outside the auditorium. Kirk's team had always taken security seriously. No exceptions, no oversights. Every layer of protection rehearsed and reinforced. But that night, something was different. Somewhere between protocol and reality, order began to fade. As Charlie Kirk stepped on stage, the atmosphere shifted, a mix of excitement and tension only those in the room could feel. Within minutes, a figure later identified as Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old from Orem, Utah, positioned himself within range. No warning call, no interception, no alert from the security detail that had been trained for exactly this kind of moment. When the shot rang out, it wasn't the noise that shocked people, it was the speed. The shooter acted in seconds. The response took longer. And for reasons investigators still can't fully explain, the entire system that was built to shield Charlie Kirk from danger seemed to collapse in perfect sequence. As if each layer of protection failed in quiet coordination. Every camera angle, every second of replay, every slow-motion frame told the same story, one of hesitation, confusion, and delay. Every layer of protection seemed to fall apart, one by one, in the same instant. Days after the tragedy, when the shock had barely begun to fade, new footage surfaced, footage that wasn't part of the official broadcast or the immediate evidence released to the public. It appeared quietly online, shared by an anonymous source, and within hours it spread across social media platforms, sparking debate, outrage, and disbelief. The video was longer, clearer, and what it showed, or seemed to show, raised questions no one was prepared to answer. In the clip, the camera's perspective catches the moments leading up to the shooting, just 21 seconds before the sound that would change everything. The crowd is restless, the stage lights are steady, and Charlie Kirk is speaking calmly. Then, without warning, one of his bodyguards, positioned near the right side of the stage, turns his head sharply toward the upper balcony. His movement isn't random, it's deliberate, as though something caught his attention. Another guard, standing closer to Kirk's left, lowers his radio. He doesn't raise it to his mouth. He doesn't issue a warning. Instead, he glances toward the same direction for a brief moment, and then freezes. There's no chaos yet, no sign of alarm, just an eerie, wordless stillness that hangs over the frame, the kind that only stands out once you've watched it too many times. And in those few seconds, between awareness and action, something critical is lost. The first shot follows almost instantly after. Crowd panic. Security rushing. Cameras shaking. But those initial moments, the pause, the look, the hesitation, they're what people can't seem to stop replaying. It's only a few seconds, but in an investigation, a few seconds can decide whether someone lives or dies. There's no official confirmation that the security team was aware of the threat, and no public statement has directly accused them of negligence. But the timing, the way eyes turned before the gunfire, has raised questions that even investigators can't ignore. Because when silence comes before disaster, it doesn't just feel suspicious, it feels deliberate. In any high-profile event, security doesn't rest on one pair of shoulders. It's built like a ladder. Contractors, subcontractors, private detail, and the event's internal security lead. Each layer is meant to add strength, structure, and safety. But in reality, it often adds something else: confusion. At the top, the firm overseeing the event coordinates logistics, assigning roles and delegating responsibility. Beneath them, subcontractors provide personnel, guards who may have never worked together before that night. Then comes the private detail, the small, tight-knit team, directly responsible for Charlie Kirk's immediate safety. Finally, there's venue security, university-hired personnel focused on crowd control and perimeter management. 4 layers, 4 sets of protocols, and 4 different definitions of what response actually means. When something goes wrong in that kind of chain, accountability doesn't travel upward, it scatters. One firm blames the other. One team insists they followed procedure. Another claims they never got the call. And somewhere in between, the truth becomes harder to locate than the threat itself. That's the reality investigators are facing now. When they trace the timeline backward, second by second, command by command, they can't find a clear order. No audible warning on the radio. No official alert logged before the first gunshot. Just movement, glances, and uncertainty. And that's the danger in layered protection. The moment it's tested, it turns into a web of silence. Because when everyone is in charge, no one truly is. And that's how responsibility quietly disappears. It's the kind of system where hesitation doesn't just happen, it hides. No one can say who gave the last command. No one can say who froze first. But everyone knows that by the time someone finally acted, it was already too late. When investigators reconstructed the timeline, they relied on official logs, timestamps, call records, synchronized footage. According to the official report, the first call for assistance was recorded at 6:48 p.m. That was the moment dispatch received the initial alert, the point at which security formally reacted. But then came the leaked surveillance data, footage from a secondary angle, paired with an internal timestamp that told a different story. That footage captured movement at 6:44 p.m., a full 4 minutes earlier than what appeared in the official record. In that clip, a man wearing a security earpiece can be seen standing at the left side of the stage. His hand moves to his radio. His mouth shifts as if he's speaking. But there's no visible sign of alarm, no signal to the team, no immediate response from those nearby. The scene returns to stillness, just long enough for it to be forgotten. Then the gunfire. 4 minutes. That's all it was. But in an investigation like this, 4 minutes isn't just a number. It's a measure of opportunity. 4 minutes to act. 4 minutes to warn. 4 minutes that might have changed everything. Because in those minutes, Charlie Kirk was still alive. The crowd was still safe. The threat was still preventable. 4 minutes doesn't sound like much. Until you remember, it was 4 minutes of warning. 4 minutes of life. And if someone knew, if even one person saw the danger forming, and stayed silent, that silence wasn't just a mistake. That silence was deadly. In the days that followed, the footage spread faster than any official statement could contain. Millions watched it, some in disbelief, others in anger. Questions filled the comment sections, interviews, and news panels. Yet when reporters pressed for answers, the response from officials was restrained and predictable. The footage was under review. No confirmations, no corrections, just a careful silence that sounded too much like control. The security firm declined to comment. The university issued a brief statement, offering condolences, but avoided addressing the inconsistencies. And when the press reached out to law enforcement, their response was simple: the investigation is ongoing. But behind the formal words, frustration began to build. Families of those who were in the audience that night, families who witnessed the chaos firsthand, started demanding transparency. Eyewitnesses spoke to local media, describing the delay, the panic, the missing warnings that could have saved lives. Even a few staff members quietly questioned the chain of command, wondering how something so rehearsed could collapse so completely. Still, those voices found little space in official coverage. Statements were filtered, interviews edited, timelines blurred. It was easier to focus on the so-called gunman, Tyler Robinson, than to ask why a room full of trained professionals seemed unprepared for what was coming. But the deeper you look, the clearer the truth becomes. It wasn't just the gunman who failed that night. It was the system that promised to protect and froze when it mattered most. Every delay, every unspoken order, every unanswered call was another thread in a larger failure. A failure that didn't begin with the first shot, but in the silence before it. And in that silence, accountability vanished. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe it wasn't awareness. Maybe it was fear. Fear has a way of freezing people. It blurs instinct, clouds judgment, and turns training into hesitation. And maybe in that moment, that's all it was. Human hesitation in the face of something no one expected to happen. But when you carry a badge that says protection, hesitation has a cost. And that cost was a man's life. Charlie Kirk trusted that system. The people, the structure, the process. Everyone in that room did. But trust is fragile. Once it breaks, it doesn't just reveal mistakes. It exposes silence. Accountability often disappears in confusion. Paperwork replaces answers. Investigations stretch on for months. Reports get buried under news stories. And yet the truth, the real truth, remains frozen in those few seconds of footage that no one can unsee. The moment a guard turned his head. The second a radio stayed down. The breath between knowing and acting. That's where the story truly lives. Not in the reports, not in the headlines, but in the silence of those seconds. Because silence doesn't erase truth, it only delays it. And sooner or later, that truth begins to speak, louder than any official statement ever will. When the footage became impossible to ignore, outrage followed. It spread online first, through short clips, slowed down breakdowns, and side-by-side comparisons with the official broadcast. Within hours, hashtags filled timelines demanding answers. People wanted to know why security hesitated, why no one acted sooner, and why the footage had never been shown in full until now. Commentators and online analysts began dissecting every frame. Some argued it was human error. Others claimed it pointed to something deeper, a procedural breakdown that cost a man his life. But no matter which side of the argument they stood on, one fact united them all: the reaction was too slow, and no one could explain why. Families of those who attended the event began calling for an independent review of the footage, one not controlled by the security firm or the university. Petitions surfaced online. Former officers, safety experts, and even a few political figures voiced concern, insisting that under review was no longer enough. Meanwhile, the media walked carefully around the story. Major outlets referred to it as a possible procedural lapse. Others described it as a security miscommunication. Words like failure or negligence were replaced with uncertainty and ongoing inquiry. The coverage was cautious, measured, almost detached, but the public wasn't. They had seen too much. They had watched the hesitation, the head turn, the motionless seconds before everything changed. And no matter how carefully the headlines were written, people understood what they saw. It wasn't just a tragedy anymore. It was a chain of silence, a sequence of hesitation that traveled through every level of command, every layer of responsibility, until the cost reached one man on a stage. For once the world saw not just a tragedy, but a chain of silence. Now that the noise has faded, and the investigations drag on, one thing remains impossible to ignore. Those final seconds before the first shot. The moments when protection hesitated, when command lines blurred, and when silence spoke louder than any alarm ever could. Charlie Kirk is gone. Tyler Robinson sits in custody, his name now forever tied to a tragedy that never should have happened. The world has chosen sides. Some blame the system, others the man who pulled the trigger. But in between those two truths lies a third. The one captured in the footage that still circulates in quiet corners of the internet. Maybe it wasn't betrayal. Maybe it wasn't conspiracy. Maybe it was something simpler. The failure to act when it mattered most. Because when a life is on the line, silence becomes its own kind of decision. And the cost of that silence doesn't vanish with the headlines. It lingers in every person who could have spoken, could have moved, could have changed the outcome, but didn't. The footage doesn't accuse anyone outright. It doesn't have to. It simply shows the looks, the stillness, the pause that swallowed those final moments of warning. Maybe we'll never know what those guards saw. Maybe no report will ever tell us who froze first. But one truth remains. If you stand close enough to stop a tragedy, and you do nothing, you become part of its story. This isn't about blame. It's about the weight of knowing. The burden that lives in the silence before the shot, and in every unanswered question that still hangs in the air. The footage speaks. The question is, who's listening? If you've watched this far, don't let this story fade into silence. Every share, every comment, every voice that asks why, keeps the pressure alive, and the truth in focus. Hit subscribe if you believe accountability shouldn't end when the cameras do. Leave a comment below. What do you see in those few seconds before the shot? Because sometimes justice doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts with people who refuse to look away. Stay curious, stay aware, and never stay silent.